guys, welcome to the Upshot. This is a podcast for dads trying to get it right. My name is Kyle. I'm joined by my good friend Shane, and we like to have conversations to help other fathers learn how to become better dads. I want to invite you guys to text the word Upshot to 97000. You'll join our text list to receive more updates and communication about how we are continuing to evolve the Upshot and give you more and more resources here in 2024. And now, here is today's episode.
All right, you're like, get this show started?
No.
Usually you get this started,
here for
but
the
you're
ride.
asking me to introduce Jason, which puts a lot of pressure on me because I usually just am the guy that asks questions and answers and has fun. You have to be the one that's professional.
Not today.
Not today. Today you gave me my role.
Not today.
All right. Well, today we are honored to have a very special guest, my friend Jason Perkins, who goes by Perko.
I do, yeah. And anywhere else in the world, I don't have to explain it. But in the US, well, I shouldn't say that. In Australia, it's not something I have to explain because everybody has a nickname there. And everybody in Australia basically cuts any words that are more than two syllables in half, and they add an O or a Y on the end of it. And I'm glad I went Perko, not Perky. That would have been very awkward. So, yeah, Perko is much better than the alternative.
Well, there's a part of me that wants to call you Perky the rest of
Yeah, I know.
But then I'll probably never see you again.
Did you get to choose that, though?
No,
Perko
it's just
it just happened.
No, it's just a colloquial thing. Like, so the postman is a postie, but the milkman is a milko. And like, if you're an electrician, you're a sparky, and if you're a carpenter, you're a chippy. So it's just they abbreviate everything.
I almost want to move to Australia just to experience that.
Yeah, it is fun. It's hard to understand if you didn't grow up with it. That's for sure.
Well, Perko, I got to say it again, we are honored that you would take the time to be here.
No, the honor is mine, honestly.
And I was trying to figure out, like, how do I introduce this guy? Because you've had a tremendous impact on my life and my family's life and, quite frankly, on my soul. But I wanted to kind of share some of the things that you've been involved in. And so I went to your About Jason Perkins
which is probably
page.
About 2 decades old. So
it's all right. So I want you to fill in any gaps. We're going to give you an opportunity to kind of share a couple things about you.
Okay.
But this is what I stole from your website. You and your wife, Kristen, you started your life together as missionaries.
That's right. Yeah, we worked with an organization called Word of Life, and has camps and conference centers in about 85 countries around the world.
Yeah.
And we had to raise our own financial support through friends and churches in Australia and in the US as well. So we were kind of what they call faith missionaries, where you just kind of live by faith and support comes in, hopefully, each month. And that's how we started out in ministry. Yeah.
Is that where you met her?
I actually met Kristen at a Word of Life camp, but we were 15 at the time. And so I was just a punk, honestly. Took me nearly a decade to grow up and convince her that I was decent enough to marry. Yeah.
Have you convinced her yet?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
no.
I don't know if I've
But,
convinced my wife
Jesus
either.
is very kind.
And you and Kristen have 3 children.
Yeah, 3 adult kids now. So Zave is 23. Olivia is 21. She's married, which is hard to even imagine.
Yeah.
But awesome at the same time. And then my youngest son, Miles, is 19.
So are you guys empty nesters?
We are officially 6 months of empty nesting. So my youngest son he graduated high school at the end of last year and then started an internship at the beginning of this calendar year. And so as we're sitting here now, 6 months ago, we became empty nesters.
Yeah, well, we're going to spend a lot of time just unpacking that, what you're experiencing, what you're learning along the way.
Good.
But I got to say a few other things about your past. So you were a camp director at Word of Life camps for a while. How many years did you do that?
Yeah, I was probably involved with Word of Life off and on for about 15 years, but directed camps for them for about 10 years.
You did that in the summer, but you also had a full-time job.
Yeah, so I worked with an organization actually here in Austin, Texas, and somehow I convinced them into letting me take the whole summer off every year. And no, they were friends back to when we first started out as missionaries. The family and their business were actually our largest financial supporter when we had to raise financial support. So they were very kind, very generous, very gracious to allow us to take 3 months off every summer. And so we would pack up our kids and some of our belongings and move to the Adirondack Mountains of New York every summer, upstate New York, which is just God's
terrible
country.
place to be, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
In the summertime, it's God's country. In the wintertime, it's a terrible place to be. It's very cold.
But there were many summers that I coveted where you got to go every
totally.
summer. You left me here.
Yes, in the heat of Austin.
Yes.
Yeah, and exchanged it for hoodie weather in the evenings and campfires and all the great things.
Yeah. And then you and Kristen called North Point Church here in Austin your home for several years.
Yeah, and it wasn't, it was an interesting story. Kristen was looking for a church when we first moved here, and I was away on a business trip, which wasn't unusual for me. And so she attended North Point when it was set up and tear down at a primary school or at elementary school, Parkside. And she called me after the service. This was unusual, and said, "I think I found our church." And she told me how great the music was and the preaching was amazing, and she had met several families. And then she said, "There's only one thing." And I was like, "What is it?" And she's like, "Well, it's a church plant." And I knew what that meant because I grew up as a church planter's kid. That meant stacking chairs and moving stuff around. And I had vowed that I would never stack chairs after, growing up in that environment. So anyway, long story short, we joined here at North Point. And I actually joined the setup and tear down team. So I was stacking chairs every Sunday, pulling trailers and all the things. And man, it's amazing how God has just worked in this place. And it's a testament to how kind and gracious and generous he is.
And then he took you on a journey to be a lead pastor at a church in another horrible place.
Yeah. So, man, I remember people telling me during that season, you really should be doing this full time, this ministry thing. And I kind of knew it. But I didn't know if I wanted to do that. Again, growing up as a pastor's kid, I'd seen behind the curtain of church world.
Sure.
So it's not always, roses. And so, long story short, said we'd pray about an opportunity in Colorado Springs. And you know what happens when you pray about things. You often end up doing them. Yeah. And so we left Austin and moved to Colorado and spent 5 years as the lead pastor of a church in Colorado Springs, which was a great experience. Yeah.
And you started this incredible nonprofit organization called Colorado Springs I Love You?
Yeah, so Cuz I Love You, or COS is the abbreviation for Colorado Springs, and so it was a bit of a play on words. And so we started it just started as a message series at our church, Cuz I Love You, to help our church engage with the community and love on the community, no strings attached, and a few other churches picked up on it. And then it was crazy. Within about 18 months or so, about 100 churches across the Springs jumped into this movement. And it became something we never intended it to become, but we found out through a phone call one day that it was one of the fastest, what they call city gospel movements, fastest growing city gospel movements in the U.S. And so some of the people that have been involved in that space came and helped us and coached us. And now today it's still going, has a staff now, its own separate executive director, its own team. And man, I think the last count, there was like over 5,000 volunteers this year involved in volunteering projects and stuff across the city.
Yeah, I love that.
It's crazy.
And then you and Kristen and your 3 kids, who I'm assuming were around high school age?
Yeah.
Junior high, senior high?
My oldest son graduated from high school about a week before we moved back to Australia. So he had just graduated. So this was 2019. Yeah. So June of 2019, we made the huge decision. Well, we made the decision before that, but we moved back in June of 2019 back to Australia. So went to Brisbane. It's been almost 5 years as we're recording this. Yeah.
And now you are the director of the Irresistible Churches Network for Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, where you're just creating relational connections and support and encouragement for churches to prioritize creating irresistible church experiences for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So the big vision is that I say it this way. I'm not convinced that every church has to be irresistible to people that don't go to church necessarily. Although I could be convinced that every church should be that way. But I am convinced of this, that every community needs at least a church, at least one church, that people that don't typically go to church would find irresistible and be like, I got to be engaged in that somehow, because they're doing so much great things in our community and our family's benefiting from it. Even though I'm not sure if I believe everything that they believe, I'm just drawn to it because the people are amazing and what they're doing is incredible. So our network exists to help see that vision come to reality, that every community at least would have one church that unchurched people find irresistible. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And then outside of that, you've been a mentor to me. You are wise beyond your years. Sometimes I think of Perko as this old, wise sage, but then I realize I think you might be younger than I am.
It's possible.
So, but you've just, you're one of those guys that when I wrestle with big decisions, I wish I had a Perko that I could have on speed dial. And actually, I was wrestling with a pretty big decision of my own a couple months ago, and you had a tremendous impact on the outcome. And part of that was just what you said about my role as a husband and a father. It's a role that no one else gets to do but me. And you encouraged me to consider, am I building a eulogy or am I building a resume? And God spoke through you, and it really helped bring clarity to a pretty big decision I had to make. So I want you to know that you've had a tremendous impact on my life, and I really value and appreciate your friendship along the way.
That's very kind, very kind.
Yeah, and then so some of those things I stole from your About Us page.
Yeah.
But if we were to say, hey, Perko,
Yeah.
tell us 3 things about you, what would you say?
Wow, 3 things about me. I'm a huge fan of my family, and my wife is honestly the best thing about our entire family. So if anyone's listening to this and you think there's anything helpful, you need to know that Kristen is the reason that you think anything of this is helpful, to be honest. So Kristen, been married almost 25 years now, so that's a miracle in and of itself. And then our 3 kids are just they're the highlight of our lives. And then I think something that, people that know me and are close to me would probably know this about me, but I'm a massive fan of live sports. And it doesn't have to be, it can be a very eclectic sport. Like I was a pickleball fanatic before pickleball was even a thing. So started playing that a long time ago, and I actually go watch pickleball, and they don't even have to be professionals. Like I'm just such a huge fan of live sports, and it can be any sport. So I'd say if there's 3 things people need to know about me, it's probably that. But then the thing that really is my driving passion, beyond those things, is this idea that I'm a very driven person, personality-wise, and I'm just convinced that that if you're not careful, you can get all your goals, but you could potentially lose your soul along the way. And so my heartbeat now, and every day I get up thinking about this one big idea, is I feel like God's given me this invitation to help leaders reach their goals without losing their souls. And Jesus said it really well when he said, you can gain the whole world, but potentially lose your soul, and what profit does it make if you do that? And so I'm kind of on a quest to see high achievers, leaders, people that like reaching their goals do that, but not for the sake of their soul. Yeah.
I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I saw that it's like the top of your About Jason Perkins page. It's that same line about helping leaders achieve their goals but not lose their souls.
Yeah.
So what does it look like to lose your soul?
Yeah.
And then how do you prevent that from happening from your experience, from what you're seeing?
So I think you have to define, and there's lots of definitions of what the soul is, but I think you have to come up with, what do you mean by that? If it's possible to lose it, then what is it that you could potentially lose? So the way I define my soul is essentially the sum makeup of my inner life. And most of our culture, most of our tribes of origin that we were kind of formed in, that includes, when I say tribe of origin, I'm referring to your family of origin, your school of origin, your culture of origin. Maybe you grew up in Western culture or, America or wherever. It's your church of origin. Most of us have been developed and formed by a tribe of origin that is incredibly externally focused. And so you get rewarded for things like efficiency and achievement. And, when you're a kid at school, you got to go to the playground first if you got the quiz done first. All these kind of external things. But nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, at least my experience, rarely did people teach us about our internal worlds and how to really care for our internal life. And so I see the soul as kind of the sum total of your inner life. And so that's the thing that you could potentially lose because you just were focused on your external life.
That's good.
Yeah.
Kyle, I've asked all the questions so far. That's the introduction.
Yeah, we're like halfway done now.
No,
I'm just
stop it.
I like it.
I'm curious what you're thinking over there as I was talking about.
Well, no, I'm resonating with the lose your soul, chasing your goals, and my mind's just chasing after.
You're in the middle of trying to figure that out.
I'm in the middle of all
you?
of that right now, and it's great. It's incredibly relevant, especially to I talk to guys who are in their. I mean, guys who are listening to this, honestly, like mid-30s.
I was
kind
just
of
going to
hit this
ask
crisis.
Yeah, how old are you, Kyle?
37,
Yeah.
36.
And most people I work with is somewhere between 35 and 45. They begin to understand, like, oh, okay, I've been chasing after external goals my whole existence so far, and it's worked for me. It typically has worked well, and they've come to a point where it's no longer working as well, or maybe not at all, and they're starting to realize, like, okay, maybe this is not the entire framework that I need to be focusing on.
Yeah, and you start adding in kids.
Yeah.
And
they make it much easier.
A decade or two into marriage,
Yes.
and you start realizing, like, everything starts competing, and you can't hold it all together chasing some external goal anymore. Yeah. And you've got to reorient into, like, this cannot be what life is supposed to be about.
Yeah.
You confronting, I'm losing ground in my soul or in my marriage or with my kids. Yeah. So I think that's extremely relevant. And I talk to guys all the time, and they're wrestling that battle. And I do. You've heard my stuff. So I appreciate the work you're doing. Yeah. It's incredibly helpful.
So when Kyle says he wrestles with that, trying to find this balance or this place where he can thrive as a father, as a leader in a performance-driven world, but yet take care of his soul. If Kyle came to you with, like, I feel what you're saying, Jason, what do I do? How would you answer that if I was to put you on the spot, Perko?
Yeah, the first thing I would ask more questions than I would give you. I'd just be wanting to, that's why I asked how old you were, and then I would ask I'd have a lot more follow-up questions. But ultimately, where I find it so often lands is if we can change our focus, especially for us achievement, goal-oriented people, if we can change our focus from what I'm going to get done to who God is inviting me to become, that is a game changer. Because if I make that my sole focus, quote unquote, to achieve who God is inviting me to become, I'm absolutely convinced he will take care of the getting done piece. Yeah. And I don't have to worry about the external anymore, because it will just flow out of who he's inviting me to become. Yeah. And it will take care of itself. And that is so hard, though, in the morning to get up and go, well, what am I going to do today? And to begin saying that it's not about what I do today, it's who I am today. Yeah. And the doing will just flow out of that. And I know it sounds so simple, but my goodness, is that hard to break that cycle. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's so counterculture. I mean, we talked about it. Like Western culture. Yeah. Like, if you listen to any popular motivational, influential guru of sorts right now in the professional world, they're going to tell you, Shane, you need a vision board and mantra and affirmations and all these things. And all of that stuff, like, you create pictures of what you want your life to look like, and none of it really touches on that component that you expressed, which is, who is God inviting me to become? Yeah. And that's a hard thing to visualize if you don't spend time with him asking those questions and seeking that and searching for it. And it's so much easier to just say, let's go chase the performance-driven things. So it's a trap.
Yeah, and let me just say, because I know there's probably some people listening that you're like, all right, now you just played the God card, and I'm not quite sure about the whole God card thing. Even if you're not a person who believes there's a God or follows Jesus or any of those kinds of things, I still think that the same is still true. And probably the best way to maybe for that person to think about it is this, and this is where you talked about the eulogy thing. I oftentimes, I call it the deathbed test. Like, my deathbed test is this: who do I really want around my deathbed at the end of my days? Yeah. As much as I love you two guys, you're not going to be top of the list. Like it's going to be Kristen, the kids, and then, it's
Totally.
you're going to be down the list a little ways. And so when you think about the end of your days, oftentimes people are invited to, quote unquote, say a few words about you at your funeral. And I literally took that concept of a few words, so that's 3, and I put into practice this idea of there's kind of 10 arenas or 10 areas of my life that I describe. And I've written down the 3 words I want said about me in each of those arenas. And this kind of, even if you're not a God person, would help you to kind of give a framework to say, not what I accomplished in those 10 areas, but what would somebody come up, if, let's say in the area of finances, if my accountant came up and they asked him to say a few words at my funeral to describe who Jason was with his finances, not what he did with them, but who he was. What are those 3 words you want that accountant to say about you related to finances? So maybe that's another way to think about it, is who am I? What do I want said about me at the end of my life? Not what I accomplished, but who I was in those different areas of life. And that helped me to begin to reframe, not what do I get done today, but when it comes to my finances, who do I become related to those 3 words? And then out of what you want to become, the doing will happen.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah.
Now, with that in mind, our audience is primarily fathers.
Right.
And you talked about how you have picked 3 words in these 10 different areas.
Yeah.
So what are the 3 words that you want your adult children to say around your deathbed?
Yeah, so it's all about being their greatest champion. So champion is one of the ones that I wanted, that they would see me as their greatest friend, and then as a guide for them in life. So those are the 3 things that I hope that they would stand up and say, like, my dad was a great guide, he was my greatest champion, and he was a great friend. He loved me unconditionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how much do your kids know that? Like, have you told them those 3 words that, like, here's what I'm trying to focus on, or are you hoping that they just catch it?
No, they're fully aware of it. Because it sits on I have 2 whiteboards in my office.
Yeah.
And then I have a meter ruler, which would be like a yardstick here in the U.S., and I have those 3 words in those 10 categories on both the whiteboards in my office, but then also on this yardstick. The yardstick or the meter ruler, it's just my way of measuring my life. And so I picked that tool and wrote it on there. It hangs in my office just as it's a daily reminder that that's actually my dashboard. Yep. That's what we're measuring, not what you're getting done today, Jace, or how big and whatever it is that you're trying to grow. But that meter ruler that's actually the measure by which you're going to measure your life.
Yeah.
Now, this is like, I love this. But going back to this idea that we live in a performance-driven world, and even with like that measuring stick, and your 3 words for those 10 areas, you measure yourself against those things. And I'm assuming there are days, weeks, months where you're like, I look at these whiteboards and this stick, and I am a failure.
Yeah.
How do you balance that with also like your identity and the care of your soul? Because I can see at times those can probably conflict with one another.
Yeah, so you have to understand too, the arenas of my life, those 10 arenas, they have rankings. So the one that is most important is at the top of the 10, and that's the spiritual. They all end in like AL, so it's like spiritual, financial, relational, parental, marital, all and so on. And the spiritual is the one at the top of the 10, because that is going to be the thing that really drives all of the other 9. Yeah. For me, as a follower of Jesus, as a God-fearing person, that happens to be top of my list. And so that's where, for me, it's beloved is one of the words. Friend of Jesus, like, is one of the other words. So it's getting really solid in the fact that all of the other 9 are meaningless compared to that one. Yeah. And everything else flows. It all flows out of that. You are beloved by your Heavenly Father, even if these other 9 areas aren't looking great today. That one is always the same, because I'm always beloved by Him, because I'm innately loved, because of who I am as a human being created in His image. It's just part of my DNA that I'm always going to be loved by my Heavenly Father. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
100%.
Okay.
And I would, Kyle, I know we have like certain questions and a topic
I don't
of
care.
Jason's
Yep.
a father to, he's an empty nesting father. But I think so many men wrestle with this idea of, I'm loved by my heavenly Father because that's what John 3:16 says. I managed to be part of the world.
Yeah.
God so loved the world. But I don't think a lot of men truly embrace this idea that they are the beloved, that God delights in them, that instead they might view their heavenly Father, if they even believe in a heavenly Father, as someone that's got his arms crossed and he's disappointed in me and he's just waiting for me to get my act together because I need to get my act together.
Yeah.
Like how do you what would you say to men who are wrestling with this idea of there's a God that would actually say, I like you.
Yeah.
I want to spend eternity with you, and you are my beloved son. Like I know there's a lot of men that might not believe that, let alone embrace that.
Yeah. So the first thing is I had to change my thinking because as I think, I live typically. And so good news is neuroscience is teaching us now that you actually can change the way you think.
Yeah.
You can change the makeup of your brain. So I use some simple mantras to help me with this. But then I also use some, and this is where I know some of you may be going to turn the podcast off. This is the moment that you're like, all right, it got weird, and I'm just turning it off. But I actually use some visualization as well for me personally because I need to visualize it. And I do use language, Shane, like what you referred to as, I'm not just loved by God, but he actually likes me. Like I like hanging out with you two. I came here today not because of the podcast, FYI. I came here because I wanted to hang out with you guys. I think I texted you, and I realized when I texted you ahead of time, I was like, I'm looking forward to being with you, not to the podcast. And then this is like the bonus that we get to hang out and record a conversation, but I enjoy just being with you guys. And I think that's the thing that I'm becoming more aware of is that God likes being with me. It's like we're going to get some things done together, but he actually is looking forward to the memories that we make doing it together, not what we got done. It's the being with us that he really enjoys. So for me, there's a couple of things that I do every day without fail. One of them is I quote a mantra. It's by an author, a great thinker, a guy named Henry Nouwen. He says it this way: you are not what you do. You are not what you have. You are not what others think or say about you. You are a beloved child of God. And in Australia, I add full stop. That's our version of period. So full stop, end of sentence, end of story. You are not what you do. You are not what you have. You are not what others think or say about you. You are a beloved child of God. Full stop. So I repeat that to myself on the regular, like not just once a day, but regularly throughout the day. But then I also visualize Jesus actually being with me.
Sure.
And I know it sounds stupid, but I grew up making fun of kids. I'm sorry to say this, but making fun of kids in the playground. You'd go to try and sit on the swing next to them, and they'd be like, you can't sit there. Sally's there, or Johnny's there. Their imaginary friend. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
You'd go to sit next to some kid at lunchtime, and they're like, yeah, you can't sit there. My friend is sitting there. I'm like, where the heck is your friend? And they're like, oh, no, that's John. He's there. And I actually do that now. It's bizarre. I sit in the mornings, I have a chair. I spend a lot of time in silence in the mornings especially, but multiple times throughout the day as well. And in the mornings, I visualize Jesus on the couch across from me, and we're just being with each other. I don't make him a cup of tea yet, although I have a cup of tea while I'm with him. I haven't gotten that weird. But I just visualize that he's been up all night waiting for me to just show up with my cup of tea because he wants to hang out. And he really does.
Yeah.
And even driving here this morning, I was driving to the church, and I was visualizing that Jesus was riding in this overly sized pickup truck that my brother-in-law let me borrow, by the way, which is such an American thing. He's got this massive F-250, and he's got like 37-inch, he told me, tires on it, plus a 4-inch lift. I had to get a small step ladder to get into it this morning. But I'm visualizing Jesus in the pickup with me. We're driving to see you guys together, and we're making memories like, hey, remember that time we rode down Ronald Reagan and we, pulled off at New Hope to see these guys? Like, we did that together. Do you remember that? And that has helped me realize He actually likes to be with me on the plane, when I'm emailing people back at work, when I'm doing a podcast. He's like, I just like being with you, Jace.
I love that. Now, you did say that, some of our listeners may have
tuned out at this point.
Tuned out, like, Jason
Yes.
is weird. What is this guy talking about? I can resonate with what you're saying, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
What would you say to the father who's listening that says, like, Jason, I can't get there.
Yeah.
I can't embrace that. Like, what would you say to that guy?
Yeah. I would say this. I'm with you. This Jason speaking now, Jason in 2015 would be making fun of this Jason. Like, you're a navel gazer. That's a little fluffy. I'm not sure I can trust you because you don't know the real world. Like, I've got crap I got to get done today. And I don't need to visualize Jesus in the seat next to me in the pickup. Like, I got to get people working. I got to get people motivated. I got to build this organization. I got to, raise funds, whatever it is you got to get done today. I get it. I was there. I would just say this. Life is probably going to bring you, whether you like it or not, some circumstances that will have to perhaps force you to begin thinking differently. And you talked about before, Kyle, your age, that kind of 35 to 45-year-old age. Life is bringing you some things that's forcing you to think of different frameworks and different paradigms. And I would just plead with you to say this. You can either lean into those things and begin to think, okay, maybe I can learn from someone that thinks a little differently from me, or you can wait for those typically painful circumstances to come where suffering begins, whether it's relational breakdown, or maybe it's your career breaking down, or maybe it's marital breakdown, maybe it's parental health, could be health breakdown.
Yeah.
But pain and suffering is a part of everybody's story. And you can either lean into it maybe a little earlier and say, like, okay, maybe that's going to come, but I can prepare myself for it. Or I would just say, to be frank, it's going to come, and you're going to become one of two things I've found. I find when I hang out with older people, and I'm old already, but I mean older than me, I typically find one of two people, two guys. I either find a bitter old man, or I find a happy fool, I oftentimes refer to them. They're just okay with, they haven't figured it all out. They don't have all the answers. They still live in a lot of mystery and confusion. They don't know how it all works, but boy, are they happy and content. And they typically have really healthy relationships with the people they love the most. Or you find a bitter old man who's just become jaded because of the pain and suffering of his life, and he just kept trying to achieve what worked for him in his 20s and 30s. He's trying to make that work in his 60s and 70s, and it just doesn't. And so I would plead with whoever's listening, saying, Perko, I'm not sure about this, seems pretty fluffy. Man, you're probably going to end up in one of those two categories, and you get to choose. That's the cool thing, is you get to choose. Do I want to become the bitter old jaded man, or do I want to be the happy, contented fool that he doesn't have all the answers, but man, he sure is content.
Yeah, and he's a delight to be around.
Typically, I'm actually about to, I was just telling you guys before we started recording, I'm about to get on a plane Sunday night, so less than a week away, and spend 24 hours with a man who has Parkinson's disease. Last time we were together, he could barely get 2 sentences out. But I've held on to both of those sentences because he's not bitter. Life has thrown him some massive pain and suffering. He can barely walk. He can barely talk. He's been a mentor of mine for 30 years. He's actually mentoring me now more when he can't say hardly a thing than he did when he could have all the words. And he's happy. He's content even in that pain and suffering. And he doesn't have all the answers, and yet he's influencing people in a very powerful way.
That's good, Jason. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, I'm reminded of in the book With by Skye Jitani, he has this illustration where it's like, imagine you're sitting at a table kind of like this, and there's a pile of cards on the table, and those cards represent things in your life that are important to you or that you find value or significance in: your children, your health, your finances, your job, your relationships, what you've accomplished. And as you get older in life, those cards start to come off the table.
That's right.
And once those cards are all gone, are you good with what's left?
That's right.
because we like to think we have control and influence over all of those things, but we have little influence over any of those things.
Absolutely.
And can we get to a place where we're content
Yeah.
with who we are becoming
Yeah.
and who is with us?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's good. It's really good.
So we want to talk a little bit about empty nesting, right? And fatherhood and what Jason has learned along in this journey.
I'd love to. Yeah. Love to dig in a little bit more.
So you just recently, I think you said it's been 6 months as an empty nester.
Yeah, so I'm a novice, let's be honest.
So there was a part of me that's like, looking back on your fatherhood journey, what would you say to 3 groups of dads?
Okay.
The dad that is currently raising toddler kids.
Yes.
Who, that's all, you know what that world is like.
Absolutely.
No sleep.
Yeah.
Just chaos continuously. What would you say to the father who's raising elementary age kids?
Yeah.
And then what would you say to the father of teenagers?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, first off, focus on your wife. Make her your primary focus. Because as I think especially of my 2 boys, I have 2 boys and 1 girl, the way I treated my spouse, I now get text messages from my boys, and I've actually gotten, I've gotten a text message from one of their girlfriends one time thanking me for the way that I treated Kristen, because Zave talks about that when he does certain things. He's like, yeah, that was what my dad did. So, yes, fatherhood is important. Don't get me wrong. Focusing on your children and raising your kids is so important. But I'm just telling you, your marriage relationship, if you're married, is probably one of the most powerful tools that God will use in parenting your kids, the way that you interact with your spouse. So I would just say, make that your primary focus.
That's really good. I think too, like even just challenging men, and I think we may have talked about this before. My memory's terrible, Kyle. But when you are having those moments with your wife where there's closeness, where there's like companionship that you can feel and experience, and you're prioritizing that relationship, as fathers, when we take a minute and look at our children in those moments, what they're communicating is, I'm safe and secure.
That's right.
Because mom and dad are good.
That's it.
And the amount of influence that has on their development is tremendous.
Huge.
Because our children need to know, is my home safe and secure?
Absolutely.
Which starts with, are my mom and dad, are they good?
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think that's so incredibly important. Sorry, keep going, Jason.
No. So and that goes for all 3 stages you've talked about. So if somebody were like, hey, can you just boil it down to one thing? Like I'm a simple person. I just need one thing. Like I said before, focus on who you're becoming, not what you're getting done. If you're just going to do one thing, just do that. I'm saying for parenting, for fatherhood, focus on that marriage relationship. And if you just get that right, a lot of the rest of it will flow out of that. And so that would be the first thing. I know it's cliche, but it goes by so fast. And I know people that are listening, especially those of you that are in like those preschool years, like before school age, like it does not seem like it goes by fast. Those days seem like decades. And I would encourage you to kind of take the pressure off during those years. Kristen and I refer to those years as our survival years. We were winning if our kids were still alive and they went to bed. Like that was a win. That day was successful. They didn't have to be clean. They could still be, they could still be like a mess. It didn't matter, but they were still alive and we were loving each other. That's a win. So I would just encourage you, don't overload yourself with all the pressure of like, I know social media gets bashed all the time, and I'm not a social media basher, but there is kind of this persona of what, like that first birthday party should be like an extravaganza, like a Super Bowl party. It's like, no, it's a first birthday. It's not the Super Bowl. And so just take the pressure off and just be present. I think that's big in those early years especially. And especially for your spouse to take the pressure off of them because they tend to carry more of that burden than us dads. I think during those early years, I'd say that. For the elementary or the primary school age, as we call it in Australia, Again, being present, I think, is really big. You're kind of moving from that carer stage to what a lot of people refer to as kind of the cop season, where you're helping them understand what's right and wrong. So just be that person. Don't try to be their best friend when they're in elementary school. Be the person that helps them understand, hey, this is the values that our family lives by. And so our family, my kids are going to be in therapy for this, but we had like a vision statement, we had a mission, and then we had a strategy. And our mission was really simple. We just point people to Jesus. Our vision for that was, by the way we love each other, people will see Jesus. And so our strategy is to love one another. It was really simple stuff. But those were the values that we set during that primary school or elementary school age, is really embedding the values that you want for your family during that season. And then as you move beyond, from the carer to the cop, with the values, you then kind of move into the coaching phase in the high school years, middle school, high school years. Well, now I'm not at every event that they're at, but I'm coaching them, I'm assisting them throughout high school, and so I become their coach. Again, I'm not trying to be their best friend, I'm becoming their coach. I'm now in the next season, I call it the champion season, where I'm now championing my kids. I'm their biggest cheerleader, I'm their biggest fan, and that's kind of the season we're in now. So those were kind of some words that helped me to focus on some things. So after you're focusing on your marriage primarily, then be that caregiver, be the cop, be the coach, and then become the champion. Is that making sense? Yeah.
I like what you did there with the 3 C's.
Yeah, the C's are helpful.
Yeah. Care, cop, coach.
Yeah.
Champion. 4.
Champion. Yes.
4 C's.
How are you doing in the first C?
I'm learning a lot. We have 2 little girls at home.
How old are they?
Lucy is 3. Maggie is 5. Just turned 5.
3 and
We're
5.
starting kindergarten at Blockhouse Elementary.
Oh, no way.
In a couple months, right?
So good.
So
I said no way, by the way, if you're listening, because my kids started out there. All 3 of our kids were at Blockhouse.
Yeah, I forgot. We talked about that before we went live on the podcast. But
Yeah.
we live in that neighborhood, and
So good.
it's a blast. We are survival is absolutely a great way to talk about it.
Yeah.
But also like turning the corner where we're learning personalities, we're seeing them come alive in new ways, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Learning, and even like, I talked about it last time on the last episode with Shane, but Maggie turning a corner from preschool to elementary school, and the emotions that are coming out of her, and her building trust with us in a way where she's choosing to let us in on her fears and where she's at with that process, and like being able to show up to care for her, not just physically anymore. Are you okay surviving? Are you hungry, fed?
Yes.
Rested, all of the things that you need. But now also emotionally caring for her.
Yeah.
Like, hey, that's sad. That's hard.
Exactly.
This is going to be really challenging, but so it's a blast.
Yeah.
We're having a lot of fun.
I'll tell you what seems tricky for me now looking back was when you have kids in the different seasons. So, I might be coaching Xavier, my oldest, but I'm still the cop for my youngest son, Miles. So, like, navigating those 2 seasons, because sometimes, full disclosure, I would bleed over and I'm copping Xav, and he needs coaching, not me to be a cop.
Yeah.
Or I'm coaching the younger ones, and they actually need a cop right now, or they need a carer or whatever. And so that was one of those things that I didn't do well all the time. And I've now... This is probably my biggest parenting tip for the whole podcast. So you can just write this down and then turn the podcast off. But
stop encouraging men to turn the podcast off.
Sorry. You can pause it. Come back to it later. Become really good at apologizing, because your kids don't need a perfect dad, but they need an authentic dad who's very authentic in their apologizing. And I don't know how many times I've had my kids, we have a family meeting that typically means dad needs to apologize for something. That's code for, dad's going to have a conversation, and it typically means apologizing, not, hey, we're going to have a family meeting because everybody needs to get in line.
Yeah.
But I've not been in line, and I need to be honest about that and tell you that I'm sorry and that I want to get back in line. and be the man that God wants me to be.
Yeah.
So if you don't do it, I keep saying if you don't do anything else, just do this one thing. But man, apologizing, become an expert apologizer. I think that will go a long way for your kids, because nobody's perfect, and they know that. But if you try to put on a persona of perfection, like I always get it right all the time, that's not going to be helpful. What's most helpful is when they get an understanding that, hey, Dad messes up, but then he makes it right.
Yeah.
I think that's super helpful.
I also think it's like, this is, again, and I'm sorry, the whole, if men's identity is unhealthy,
Yeah.
and we're driven by our performance, because that's where the world is going to naturally take us.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to come to a place where we can apologize, because an apology means we're not perfect. And if my identity is based on a foundation that's all performance driven, we are going to be discouraged to apologize.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it's so important, going back to soul care.
Absolutely.
Can we embrace this idea that we are loved, period,
Yeah.
on our best and our worst day? Because if so, it makes it a whole lot easier for us to come to our kids and apologize for the times that we have missed the mark.
Yeah. Jess reminds me at home frequently, and I don't know who said this or where she got it from, but she says, how do we prioritize being in right relationship before being just right? So we wrestle with that.
It's good.
Frequently as well. And it does keep our ego. For me, it's ego. And golly, it's tough.
It gets in the way.
But it's another training ground, because it's not just parenting where I have to wrestle with that too. It's at work, and it's in marriage, and everywhere else. So if that's a mindset that we can embrace, then man, we're really.
One of the most meaningful, memorable conversations I've had with my kids in the last 2 years, probably now, maybe 3 years at the most. I didn't have anything to apologize for at this family meeting. Like, I wasn't coming with the agenda. I've got some things that I need to apologize for. But I came to them with a question. And it goes back to your belovedness. It's hard to ask this question if you're not completely rooted in it's okay no matter what they say. And I asked them, as we were getting closer to being empty nesters, I said, hey, I need to hear from you so that I can ask for your forgiveness. What was the most hurtful thing that I ever did to you during your childhood?
Oh, boy.
And nobody wanted to talk.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I just said, no, I need to hear this. And I desperately need you to tell me. And so we went around the table. We were all together, all five of us. Everyone's crying, of course. And, I just listened. Whether I recalled it differently or not makes no difference.
Yeah.
That's meaningless at that point. And I just listened, and I would ask, how did that make you feel? What's that feel like now? And then I just sincerely apologized for that, whatever it was that I said, or something that I did or I didn't do. And man, it was one of the most meaningful, powerful conversations we've had as a family. And yet it wouldn't have happened if, back to your point, I wasn't okay with the fact that Jesus still likes me.
Yeah.
He still loves me no matter what's going to be said. It's okay. It's not going to devastate me.
Yep.
It will be devastating, but it's not going to ruin me. And man, that was such a meaningful conversation. Still, we talk about it still, and like we are right now. And it's super helpful. But you can't do that unless, back to your point, you're really solid and you are fully loved no matter what.
And I think what you communicated to your children, whether they're really young or really old, is you're safe with Dad.
Yeah, it's okay to be honest in this moment, for sure.
Yeah. And I think I can see how that had a tremendous impact on your kids.
Yeah.
It makes sense too why your adult children now, or their people they're dating, or maybe spouses, are texting you about, hey, we appreciate the way that you pursued your wife or cared for us. because you've opened doors to show them, hey, it isn't about just performing.
Yeah. You don't have to get it right.
You've modeled it.
Yeah.
Really, really well. And
Yeah.
so it makes sense. And so my question is like you've talked about the text messages, but what other fruit are you experiencing now as your kids are older and maybe the interactions are less, or they're not living at home, you're not seeing them at dinner every night?
Yeah.
What is that like now as a dad? What are you feeling? And what are you looking for out of these relationships with your kids in this season?
So there's two things that we now measure, because again, I'm achievement. By the way, if you're familiar with like the Enneagram, that whole thing, I'm a 3.
Yep.
So I'm an achievement junkie. So we have two things we measure now. When I say we, it's my wife and I, Kristen and I. We measure two things as it relates to our kids. We measure when they want to be back at home without any reason. So that's like a massive win for us. They weren't invited. I mean, they're always invited, but they weren't invited for a special occasion or something, but they want to spend time back at the house. And then the other thing is when they want to spend time with each other and we're not involved. That's massive. So this isn't going to get released for, I'm assuming, a little while, but like not this weekend, but next. We are out of the country. Kristen and I are in the United States. My 2 youngest kids are going to fly down and surprise their oldest brother on their own dime. They're flying down to the city he lives in and spend the weekend with him for his birthday. That lights us up.
Yeah.
The fact that not only they want to be together, but they sacrifice time, energy, money to go do that. Huge win. That's a massive win for us. I got a text message from the 2 younger ones the other day, and I'm in tears in the airport as they're describing, hey, we're going to go down and celebrate Zave's birthday, but we've set it up with his girlfriend, so he doesn't know we're coming, all those kinds of things. So that's massive. And then I just happened to have a birthday a few weekends ago, and they all want to come and hang out for the weekend. Like my youngest son, he's 19 years old. He came for 4 entire days, Friday through Monday, took time off work, because he just wanted to hang out, not because we had some extravagant thing planned, although we went and did a bit of Topgolf, we did a couple of fun things, but he just wanted to be with us. And and the reason why this resonates so much, here's the reason why I think it resonates so much, is because it reflects what God wants with us. This is why I think human beings, even if you don't believe in God, that kind of thing, you're listening to it and you're like, yeah, I want my adult kids to want to hang out and be together when they're in their 30s and 40s and 50s. Yeah, I want them to come home and be with us. It's because there's something inside of us. Even if you're not sure about the whole God thing, there's something inside all of humanity that resonates with that because of how we were designed. And we were designed to be with God in his presence. And that's why Jesus came to the earth, to be with us. And that's how we spend our days, if we're willing to be with him. So that's why I think it resonates so much, even if you're not a believer, so to speak, or it probably is resonating with you because of that thing deep inside of you of being with God.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, that's how we measure the two things at the moment.
I love those things.
Yeah.
I think that's a great place to wrap it.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. Even though we didn't do all the regular things.
We didn't do it all, but would love to hear, if you guys, a takeaway from the podcast today of like what are, or unless you have other questions.
No,
I don't want to cut you short.
No, we need to honor Jesus' time. We could go forever.
We could. But yeah, what's something you guys are taking away today, you're going to take home with you?
For me, Jason, you have encouraged me to pay attention to when I need to apologize. My kids tell me all the time, as a Canadian, I say I'm sorry a lot.
I'm sorry.
Because I can empathize with them in a lot of areas of like they experience difficult circumstances as a result of things outside of me.
Yeah.
But I'm not quick to apologize for the gaps that I've created.
Okay.
And I just want to thank you for challenging and encouraging me to think about the times that I need to be quick to approach my kids and offer a sincere and authentic apology. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me today, Jason, I am encouraged to relook at what is my measuring stick for just the way I'm living right now.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So that that it deeply resonates. I don't have 10 categories, but I've got a few.
Yeah.
You're right. And we need to knock the dust off of some of it and make sure it is, let's say, updated. But if I don't have that nailed down, then of course I'm going to struggle with fulfillment day to day, right? So that's been a great lesson and takeaway for me.
I know you did most of the talking, but do you have any takeaways yourself, Jason?
A good reminder for me was when I was talking about driving down here with Jesus in the pickup, and I know that's weird for some people, but I'm just reminded when I've recently begun asking him, and this is where it's starting, I know, to get really weird. When we're walking together or we're driving in the car together or I'm sitting on the couch next to him having a cup of tea, I've begun asking him for the first time in my entire life, hey, what do you want to talk about today? And he keeps bringing up the same thing like a broken record over and over again. He wants to always talk about how much he loves me and how much he loves people, and he wants me to love people through him. It's like the same theme all the time. And so for me, the big takeaway today is I want to go throughout the day experiencing his love and then extending his love to other people. So anyone I come in contact with today, my big takeaway is going to be, do they feel loved? Will they feel loved by me today?
Well, Jason, I know that just being on the other side of you, whether it's experiencing you in person or experiencing you from a distance, I get real authentic glimpses of Jesus through you. And I think other men and dads will as well, just being on the other side of you. Where can men find you?
Yeah.
What is there a social media account that you'd say, hey, come follow me here?
Yeah. I'm not, full disclosure, I'm not great on social media.
Sure.
I'm there, but I'm not great at it.
It's okay.
But yeah, so it's just my name with my nickname in between. So it's Jason Perkins on just about anything. Website is the same, socials is the same. And then if you want to email me, because that's probably the one thing I am half decent at. I do get back to emails, or I have people that help me with that. Shoot me an email. It's just jason@perco.company. So jason@perco.company. I'd love to connect.
Well, Perko, thank you for being a great example to me as a father and as a man and as a friend, and you do reflect Jesus, and I'm very grateful for you. And thanks you for the time being on this podcast.
Yeah,
with
my
me and
pleasure.
Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.
It's been awesome.
Kyle, you want to wrap us up? Anything special to say?
Nope.
That's all
Not
you
today.
got?
Thanks for joining and listening.
Guys, thanks for tuning in. And as always, you can reach us at the Upshot at mpaustin.com.
That's
Is that
right.
right? That's your email. If you guys have certain topics that you'd like us to cover, or if you want to shoot Jason a message through us, you can email us there. Thank you again, Jason.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah. Hey, dads, thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Kyle and I are honored to have you, and we hope you took something away from the episode. Wherever you are, we appreciate your support. So go ahead, hit that like button, the subscribe button, or whatever button is in front of you with the technology you're using. And if you wouldn't mind to let us know that you're actually tuning into this podcast, we would love it if you would text the word Upshot to 97000. That won't just let us know that you're listening, but it's also a way that you can subscribe to any updates or resources that we will have coming down the pipeline in the future. Again, guys, thanks for tuning in. We hope you have a wonderful week, and we can't wait to see you next time.